Hey, welcome to All Saints. My name's Bill Berger, and it's good to be with you. If you're newer to All Saints, or maybe you've missed a few, hey, it's really good to be with you today. Just a quick reminder, check out believedoubtseek.org, our website, and you can find all kinds of things about All Saints Church. You can find video archives. You can give there and just get some more information about the church, maybe find a group. We'd really love to have you be a part of what we're doing here in Seattle, and you're welcome. You're welcome to join us. And so I just wanted to say that and say, again, thanks for being with us today. We are in a series just looking at basic things that we humans go through and emotions that we feel. Last week we talked about our quest for certainty. This week we're looking at dealing with anxiety, which is pretty much a pandemic in and of itself with all of us. And interesting to note that the scriptures, the Bible, has really a lot to say to help us, but maybe not in the way that we're used to. And so we're going to look at Psalm 27 and see what it has to say to us about anxiety and fear. And so I wanted to play a little word game with you, and maybe just to get your anxiety heightened. I don't know how nice that is, but let's just let me throw out some words to you, and then we'll get it going, and then you know that it's there, and then that'll make it much more relevant for me to be able to address it, okay? Pandemic, election, jobs, relationships, homeschooling children. How you doing? Where are you at on the anxiety meter? Well, all of these come with, as you all know, we all know, certain amounts of anxiety and fear. Those two go together. The root of our anxiety is fear. It's the fear we may lose something. It's the fear we may get something. It's the fear we may miss something. And interestingly enough, before we read the psalm, Jesus says something that's so profound and so good for us to hear. He says, look, I am with you and I will never leave you nor abandon you. And that's something that some people can't just tell you. You have to experience. And maybe that's what we're going to get to by the end of our talk today. So no matter how bad it looks, we're not alone. You're not alone. Not alone in the universe, not alone in the pandemic, not alone in unemployment, not alone in relationship things, not alone in homeschooling kids. We're not alone. And so I want to read this psalm. I'm going to kind of chop through it a little bit. So basically we're going to look at Psalm 27, verses 1 through 4, but I'm going to read a couple other verses after that. It starts off by saying, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident." And here's the key, and we're going to spend all of our time here. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. And then verses 10 and 11, though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. And then verses 13 and 14, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart. Wait for the Lord. And so this psalm will give us a refreshing look at the reality of life and how we deal with the beauty and terror of it. So it's interesting that all the books and all the articles that we read and that trying to help us overcome our anxiety and fear say this: what you are afraid of or anxious about may never happen. I've said it to my kids, I've said it to my spouse, I've said it to myself, I've said it to other people in our church. Hey, look, everything you're afraid of, everything you're anxious about, it's probably not going to happen anyway. It's just an irrational fear. Well, why do we say that? Because it's basically some sort of a strategy for us to overcome. And so it's really a waste of time to worry about things that may never happen, right? Isn't that what the books tell us and the professionals tell us? Instead, it would say, visualize a future that's better, that's satisfying, that gives you peace. Well, this may not be encouraging to you, what I'm about to say right now, but that's really not at all what the psalm is telling us. It's not telling us to visualize a better way and to think like, oh, well, that, the odds of that happening are X and O, and maybe it won't happen, and I'm being irrational, so I just need to calm down. Well, the psalm isn't telling us. Like when we go to verse 10, he's saying, look, even though my mom and my dad may forsake me, and maybe we've experienced that in this election season where we just don't agree with our family on the ways we've looked at politics. And the psalmist is saying, look, here's the deal. Even though there's no indication that the psalmist's parents, his mom and dad, have actually forsaken him, he's doing opposite of what all the books and all the articles are telling us. He's imagining the worst that could happen. He's saying, look, my family might abandon me. That would be the worst thing for me. And he's imagining that. Why? Well, because he wants a strategy of life that can stand up to all anxieties and fears, no matter how bad they are, no matter how awful it may get. He's saying, I have a strategy that can withstand all of that, that will actually give me the life that I want. So the realism of the scriptures, the biblical scriptures, is refreshing because we have a way of dealing with anxiety and fear that assumes that the worst things may and can happen, but it doesn't matter because we can use this strategy on anything. Well, what's the strategy? Like I said, it's all in verse 4, and I'll repeat it. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple. Well, there's three things here that we're going to look at. Dwelling, gazing, and seeking. And so let's look at these. And so again, on dwelling, he says the one thing that I ask, the one thing, and that's our theme all the way through the rest of this. To deal with our anxiety and fear, there's one thing that we need. So he says in this one, to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Well, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't necessarily mean a physical place. And I think that is really good for us to hear because as much as we all miss gathering together in this place, we're really still gathered together in the temple of God in Christ as we're listening together, as we're learning together, as we're maybe texting one another or Zooming one another, that we are still gathering together and dwelling in the presence of God. May not be here physically, but we can still do that. And that's kind of where we're going here with this. What he's really asking for, instead of just this physical place, he's asking for the presence of God. He's asking for the face of God, that he wants to always be in God's presence. And maybe that's something that you haven't really thought of. And again, sometimes our anxieties and fears, well, a lot of time our anxieties and fears push us away from that reality because we're just trying to get through it and get over it, instead of remembering and focusing and dwelling on the presence of God in the midst of the terrible. 95% of the time, I have to remind myself what I know about God rather than how I feel about God. If my faith relied on my feelings, then my faith would never really mature at all, because a lot of times my feelings are betraying me. Where is God? Why doesn't God end this? Why isn't there this magic thing like, hey, we're praying, I've prayed that it would end, have you? Why hasn't it? Well, instead, I have a history, a personal history, in which I have seen the moments God intervened in my life. Sometimes in quite random ways, and so I know God's presence has been with me. I can turn around in my life and look and see, oh yeah, God was there, God was there, God was there. And that vaults me forward into the present, into the future. Why would he leave me now? That's part of our faith journey. I like to listen to stories from you and from other people of faith so I know that God's present in other people's lives. I've tried to absorb myself in the scriptures and learned from the Psalms, learned from the New Testament, from people that I can read here and realize that and know that God has been present throughout history. And when times get tough for me, or even when I am consumed with fear and anxiety, I can go back to what I know rather than rely on how I feel. It's such a crucial spiritual discipline for us all to develop. And I want to say that I look at what's going on in this past 8 months that we've been dealing with this pandemic to hopefully realize that we're seeing that we don't need a building for us to mature in our faith. We need each other, we need the scriptures, and we need to realize and know who God is and his character. That's going to help us understand and know that God is present with us, and we can dwell on that, and that's what helps us overcome our anxiety and fear. So we need to absorb the scriptures to learn about the God of history. We need to hear the stories of other people's encounters with God. And then when our feelings are either negative or just numb, we will be able to go back to what we know is true and lean on that knowledge that God is present in our lives, that he will get us through. And realize this, nothing can take God away from you. So when life is scary and we're anxious about the pandemic, we're anxious about our finances, the economy, the election, a person, remember the first lesson that we learn from this psalm is that we must rely on what we know about God rather than what we feel about God, and that we absolutely must stay connected in worship with fellow Christ followers, otherwise we'll spiritually die. That's the secret to a fearless life. So right now, as you're listening, text somebody right now, hey man, how can I pray for you? Or hey, I miss you. What's going on? Let's find a time to get together and let's pray for one another. That's what we need. We need that. 2 is gazing. In that verse 4 in that psalm, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. Now, beauty is such an important thing for us. Beauty feeds our souls. Beauty enlivens our imaginations. Beauty makes us feel whole as it engages our creativity. As emotional human beings, we find God through beauty. Some of us like to, again, looking at Instagram feeds, and some of you are out and taking these gorgeous pictures of hikes or, dinners, hangouts with friends. That beauty just stimulates us and moves us and kind of gets us into this other place that isn't thinking about the horrific stuff that's going on around us. Not to just put our head in the sand, but to remind us that there is beauty out there and it's present and we can find it. And so, beauty looks different for each one of us, right? We all have different ways that way we see things. We understand that, hey, that's beautiful to me. That might not be so beautiful to this person. But for me, when I listen to a bluesy Led Zeppelin song, there's some beauty in there, man. Or the vastness of a desert landscape, or the way my wife interacts with our kids and grandkids. I find exquisite beauty that at times can reduce me to tears. That just stirs my soul to see that. But the shredding guitar of Jimmy Page or a cactus may not do it for you. Instead, you may read a poem or write a poem or look at a painting, and that's what stirs your soul. You may taste some exotic cuisine that transforms your understanding of how beautiful food can be. And that might not be for somebody else, but for you, that's the thing. When you gaze upon that, it just begins to give you this feeling and understanding that there's beauty out there amidst the horrific. So whenever you find beauty, gaze upon it, because in beauty, you will find the face of God. Just as we need food to nourish our bodies, we need beauty to nourish our souls. So much of our world contains anger. Oh my gosh. I don't need to go into this, but you are well aware of it. There's anger and resentment and hatred that we need something else that will remind us of the beauty of God in the world. And we find that in other people and other people's experiences and other people's stories. And look for the beauty. Even this week, look for places of beauty and then just gaze upon it and just meditate on it. And so we need to share our experiences of beauty with one another and learn about beauty from one another. I mentioned Zeppelin, and you think, well, ugh, that's awful music. If you're saying that, you should email me so we can have a little counseling session. We can Zoom and talk about it. But if I sat down with you and took you through one of their songs, it may not be to your taste still, but you would understand why that's beautiful for me. Likewise, I get nothing from camping. It leaves me feeling dirty, cold, and full of bug bites. But that's because I don't experience it the way somebody else enjoys camping, and I don't understand how to find beauty in being without the internet. So share with me your experience of beauty in that form, and we will both be enriched. I have a daughter that loves to get outdoors, that loves to hike, loves to camp. And she didn't get that from me, but I can see the beauty of it through her eyes and her experiences and her pictures and her stories. And I can look at that and go, oh, that's awesome. That is beautiful. So in beauty, we find the face of God. And as you gaze on the beauty of God, your heart will soften and you will rediscover the closeness of God to you. So when David wrote this psalm, he was going through a tough time and there was chaos and disorder in the world. Sound familiar? He was in danger physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And in the natural course of things, he didn't feel close to God. Man, this just relates to me. And maybe, hopefully to you too, that there's been moments in this pandemic where I'm just lost and numb and like, God, where are you at? I don't see any beauty. I don't want to dwell here. But David knew that he should proactively seek out ways of filling his life to change that. He had to focus on what he knew about God rather than how he felt about God. He had to gaze upon the beauty of God and find the face of God. It wouldn't have been any easier for him to do that as it is for any of us in our current anxieties that we're facing now. But making the determined effort was worth it to preserve and strengthen his faith, that he chose to dwell. He chose to gaze and look for beauty and to realize, though, as bad as it may seem, this strategy I have will get me through whatever, and I can sense the peace and joy of life rather than struggling with the anxiety and fear that are all around me. David recognized that it was a process, that a rediscovery of intimacy with God would take time, but that's what life is all about, the journey into intimacy with God, and we need patience for that. As David wrote in the last verse of the psalm, wait for the Lord, be strong, let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. That is the instruction. Just to take the time and dwell and focus and turn my face toward what is beautiful and dwell on that. So in this anxious and fearful time, wait on the Lord. Focus on what you know to be true about God. And it might not be very much, or it might be a whole bunch, but find what you know is true about God and focus on that. Gaze upon his beauty. We see the face of Jesus who knows us, loves us, and is with us through all of our anxious trouble. His presence is peace. And then finally, so we've looked at dwelling, gazing. Now we're going to look at seeking and wrap up here. So to get relief from anxiety, we have to seek God through Jesus. We dwell on what we know about God and gaze upon his beauty. This creates a habit of the heart. You develop a whole orientation toward God. It doesn't happen quickly. It takes time. The books and the articles give us behavior modification ideas, breathing techniques, thought control, learn to tune out negative thoughts. But the scriptures give us tools that they're not like a pitch or a Band-Aid or some kind of mantra to get my mind refocused and myself centered again. It's renewal. A new heart, a new way of life, a new way of being. It takes a long time to develop. It isn't easy. It's not a quick fix. It will take courage, trust, and time. And I think that we have to really understand that and desire that and want that. Because the things that we love are the things that we give time to. So that gets us to this understanding of what is this one thing. And it really comes to my desire to know God through Jesus Christ. So we have to start with, Lord, I'm going to dwell on you. I'm going to gaze on your beauty. I'm going to seek you. I don't have room for fear or anxiety. Today, you are the one thing. You are the only thing. I will make time for this. I will seek you and you alone. In the presence of the King, we don't have to ask for small gifts, but we can boldly ask for this. God, change the desires of my heart to be things that know I need you and focus on you. And this is what I believe how the Church of Jesus Christ rises up and is inviting and is encouraging and is attractive rather than repelling and trying to align ourselves with a politic that makes more sense with our faith. I think it comes back to this, the one thing. So here's a prayer. And I encourage you to pray this with me. Lord, I don't have courage. Help me with my unbelief. Lord, I'm afraid. I have no record on which to rely. I can't fix this. But I dwell in you. I gaze upon you. And I seek you wholeheartedly. And I think that's where we start. It starts with small steps. My wife just recently helped my daughter move an apartment. And it was just Sue. And our daughter had to go to work. And Sue basically, we were just talking and we were both just taking this in because it's so relevant. She just basically said, I took 4 cups at a time and moved them to her other apartment. It was down the hall. I took an armload of whatever I could get and just went down the hall. And it took her 8 hours to move from room to room, but she got it all done. And I think that's for us, is to really take the time to dwell. Not big things, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and things are going to be different, but you could wake up tomorrow and say, Lord, I don't have the courage. Help me with my unbelief. Taking steps toward you, to trust you, to have you be the one thing that I want. And that's your prayer. Then I think that you will see beauty like you've never seen before. You will learn how to dwell like in ways that are magnificent, and your soul is enriched. And we have to seek that one thing. And I encourage you to do that. So I would love to hear from you and how this. What steps are you taking? What are some ways in which you can share with other people your story of moving towards this one thing? Gosh, we'd like to hear that. So go to our website, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much for being with us. And look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.